Hello and welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical trivia and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, we start at the appendix. Imagine that you're an Ars Magica necromancer. The year's 1220, and you're dissecting a corpse to become more magically powerful. This one has a sport, which is what you call unexpected extra features, like additional teeth, calcified internal twins. This one has an extra thing at the end of its digestive system. It doesn't seem to do anything, so you can't describe it functionally. It looks vaguely like an earthworm, and because you speak Latin, like most Hermetic Magi, you think of it as a veriform, meaning worm-like, appendix, meaning thing tacked on at the end. Initially, this is exciting because you haven't seen one of these before. When you see new things while doing dissections, your character learns more about the body faster, and so you become a more powerful magician. You decide to check the books and see if anyone else has seen these. The first person you check, of course, is Galen. Galen is the great anatomist. He's been the anatomist that everyone refers to for the last 1,000 years. Galen is your guy, and he has never seen this appendix. No one has ever seen this appendix. Now, this is because in Ars Magica, what people believed to be true in medieval Europe is generally speaking true, and in the real world, Galen didn't dissect human corpses to write his books of anatomy. He dissected monkeys, and the monkeys he dissected don't have appendixes. So, in Mythic Europe, no one has one, but this guy does. Now, this wouldn't cause you concern, except the next person you vivisect also has an appendix. And the next. So, time to do some tests. If you create a corpse, and remember, created items are more perfect than items that appear from the real world. They're closer to the holotype, to use modern scientific parlance. What happens if it has an appendix? What happens if you use Intelligo magic to look inside your own body and you have an appendix? What's this organ? Where's it come from? What does it mean? Now, if it's only a local event, if you write to necromancers elsewhere in Europe and you say, "Gang, can you all look for this thing?" and they say, "No, don't be ridiculous, we haven't seen it," it could be that this is local warping. Now, local warping occurs when magicians cast magic either in a single powerful event or smaller spells over and over again over a prolonged period near a local population sufficient for that population to be slightly distorted by the magical energy. There are some quite extreme versions of warping already in the Ars Magica role-playing game. There is one community of people where the average body temperature is about 20 degrees lower than that for the rest of the human race, so they live perfectly comfortably on the top of the Alps, but they die of heat exhaustion if they descend to lower altitudes. House Tromare is served by a caste of amber-eyed individuals who have an inherent sensitivity for magic, are more likely to be homosexual than average, and all of whom can trace their ancestry back to a small group of soldiers whose eyeballs had been gouged out by the Bulgars and were replaced by a single spell a couple of centuries ago. So, if you look at your local community, and this appendix effect is only found in the very young, you could say that this was because of some sort of local cataclysm that had occurred recently. You could work back through the population, using the age of the people to date when the cataclysm occurred, and then you could find the local magician, or a local rival, or whether you yourself were responsible for the appearance of this thing. But what if it's regional? Then it could be a miracle, but let's not work on that basis. If God wants to do something in Mythic Europe, he just does it. Water, wine, done. He doesn't need to create a wine-making machine, so similarly, he doesn't need to create a new organ. It could be that it's a fairy symbiote. Now, we do have other fairy symbiotes. The main one that's been described is from Transylvania, which is a sort of thief weed. You cut open the fleshy part of your left hand near the thumb, you insert a sprig of the weed into it, and while the weed remains embedded there, it makes any lock that you touch fall open. The weed is, of course, vampiric, and like all fairies in Ars Magica, it exists to gain energy by altering your life story. But nonetheless, this means that if you've seen the thief weed, you've seen something similar to what a fairy appendix would look like, so you may have some idea of what the fairy who created it is attempting to do. Perhaps the appendix is there as the forerunner to some great fairy story, a famine, a plague, an invasion. You'd need to carefully examine the appendix to work out what it does. It could give you hints as to what sort of cataclysm is coming and whether your region is going to be on the receiving end of the cataclysm, like a plague, or whether you're going to be causing harm to your neighbours. For example, your people suddenly discover that they can eat stones and therefore their armies no longer have logistical problems with food. But what happens if everyone has an appendix? What happens if you have an appendix? It certainly wasn't there before. Like most corporeal necromancers, you know all of your internal organs. You certainly didn't have this weird squiggly thing where it is now. What could have caused that? Well, it could have been a cosmological change. If you believe Empedocles, who was an ancient Greek philosopher of great importance to Helleno-Buddhism and to House Creamen in Ars Magica, time is a circle. It starts at a point of perfect enlightenment, and Empedocles himself wrecks everything and plunges the world into time. Everything gradually decays from there, with life becoming less and less coherent and ordered, until eventually all that's left are protean shapeshifters who can exist in chaotic, almost randomly violent environments before even these are driven to extinction and everything is a swirling, chaotic void. After a time, the chaotic void begins to cohere again, and life emerges. From that simple life, organs emerge, and these organs move independently through the world until, as the amount of order in the universe increases yet further, they combine into more complicated beings, becoming more and more ordered until eventually, at the far end of time, they transcend physicality and become beings of pure spirit. So, does the appendix signal somewhere something happened that made time briefly go backwards? Now, this is very important to your magicians because the downward spiral of time is what makes destruction magic easier than creation magic. Your character can disintegrate a wall and not have to spend great magical energy making sure that the wall doesn't reassemble itself. However, if you make a wall, you have to spend great magical energy to stop it fading away at sunset, because stones don't fall up, except in the countercyclical alarm that the time of increasing order, things work the other way. If, however briefly, something caused time to go backwards, and you could, however briefly, cause that to happen again, during that brief time, your power of creation would be limited only by your character's physical endurance, and your character's physical endurance is regulated and can be reinforced by creation magic. So although you wouldn't have the powers of a god, you'd still be limited to your own senses and your own mystical capabilities. You would nonetheless be able to permanently alter the structure of the world if you planned what you were doing quite carefully. So next time you're playing Ars Magica and there's a skirmish and one of your grogs guts some poor unfortunate bandit, make sure to look very carefully at his digestive system.